Hey, welcome to the Star Wars Unlearned podcast. My name is Josiah Shuett, and I'm joined by Nathan Hawley. What we're doing is we're looking at Star Wars from the perspective of its creator. So we're turning off our fan brains and really just trying to uncover the story that Lucas is trying to tell. We're in the middle of our series on the Phantom Menace, where we explore the filmmaking, the history, the mythology, and everything else that Lucas and his team used to bring this first chapter of the Star Wars saga to life. So join us as we dive in and unlearn what we have learned about the Star Wars story. The next thing is Obi-Wan and the Qui-Gon conversation, right?
Mm-hmm. And I always wondered, man, because I always thought Obi-Wan looked so weird in this scene. And I thought, oh, maybe it's just because they were like standing blatantly in the sun. You know, I was always like, maybe that's why. But now I know because you filled it in for me.
Yep.
Like,
it looks different because it's shot digitally. It's part of the reshoot, and you can tell because Ewan McGregor has a dead squirrel on his head. You know, it's like, is that a wig or like a Davy Crockett hat? You know, it looks so bad. But
yeah.
But yeah, as a kid, I was like, "What's weird?" I mean, I didn't dwell on it, but as a kid, I was like, "Oh, his hair is kind of weird." Anyway, what's happening? You know, I didn't really think about it, but yeah, Ewan McGregor got always got kind of the short end of the stick with the wigs. But Revenge of the Sith, Revenge of the Sith one doesn't look that bad, but you can still tell.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Gotcha. Yeah, I never noticed the Revenge of the Sith. This is the only one. This is the only time I've been like, wow, that looks weird. Something looks weird about Obi-Wan here.
This one doesn't bother me as much as the Attack of the Clones wig. That one really bothers me because that one shows up, I think, a lot more, and I really don't like that one. Yeah. But because I think, I don't know, I think it's just such a contrast. His normal hair in episode 2, I think, looks so cool.
Yeah.
But then his wig just looks like the worst kind of mullet from like 1989 or so. It's just, I don't know, I didn't like it. But anyway, oh well, it doesn't matter.
There you go.
But yeah, any thoughts on this scene?
Well, that was one. I always thought it was weird too. I mean, I know this is appropriate for the scene, but just, I don't know, it's always been weird for me to see them in the sunlight, you know, like in the, not just direct sunlight, but it's like in the shade, you know? So you see the sunlight coming through the leaves and stuff. It was always just really odd to me. I don't know why. I guess you don't really see that too often in movies. Maybe you do, and I just never pay attention. But the scene just visually always just kind of felt like it slapped me across the face for some reason. Like something's really weird here.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
That's true. You bring that up. It is kind of, it is a very kind of naturalistic. And again, maybe it could be Lucas's attempt to push that documentary style where it's not too pretty. It's not too, could be that they had to do this very, very quickly. You know, this was part of not a reshoot, but a pickup. This could have been late in the schedule. They may have not had enough time, or maybe that's just the way they wanted to look. I don't know. I don't really know, but that's a good point though. It's because we don't really talk about the lighting too often, especially when how it falls on actors' faces. So that's a good aspect of the film to bring up right now for sure, because it is a unique, at least from what I can remember, it is a unique instance of that in this film.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've noticed that a few times throughout this movie, just as we've gone through it. You know, I've done a lot of work in photography, and you can see the light, just that harsh, real light, really clips off of their skin in places. You know, where it's just so white, where it's almost that shiny clipping kind of look you get. You know, but. Makes sense. I mean, if you're standing on Tatooine, you know, but I just found that kind of interesting because it's not typical. Like you said, they're usually, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like most of the time in movies, they try to avoid that, you know, where they try to, do the method you said, where it's like, well, let's redirect the natural light and get you in the shade, but still feels natural light, but it's not so harsh, you know? So interesting. Maybe it's just the sign of, the hope coming, right? Because we just left the night and now it's speckling through the shadows. I don't know.
Yeah, it's true. And it could be also the fact that this is shot digitally. It could be that the digital cameras they were using, I think they were, if they weren't prototypes, they were just one generation up from a prototype when they were shooting these reshoots / pickups, because they wanted to shoot the whole movie digitally, but they just couldn't get the cameras ready in time. And so when the cameras were finally ready, that's when they did these pickups. And so it could be that the sensor is just messing, it isn't just picking up the light as well. You know, it's getting blown out in certain areas, and it's just not, you know, it's not, well, you know, it obviously doesn't match the film parts of the movie, which is most of it. as perfectly. But again, I don't think it's too noticeable. But like if you really look at it, yeah, it could be just be that the digital sensor is not picking up the lighting and well, just the scene as well as it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Especially once we get to Attack of the Clones, it looks way better. I think they
Yeah,
really nailed the
right.
digital photography there. But
Mm.
it was still early days back then. So
Yeah. Was this the first digital movie, like shot digitally, or was it just one of the first?
One of the first to include digital photography in it. But Attack of the Clones was the first American film that was projected digitally and shot digitally. Everything was from front to end digitally, shot
Gotcha.
digitally, projected digitally. Not every theater was equipped with digital projectors at that point, so a lot of Attack of the Clones was projected on film. They had to shoot it digitally, then print it on film,
Whoa.
but it was shot digitally. And then by the time Revenge of the Sith came out, it was already digital cinema had kind of become enough of a thing and become popular enough that there were more theaters that they could project it digitally. And now, of course, it's the standard. Very quickly people realized, oh, this is a great way to maintain quality. Now you may remember this because I wasn't really around for much of this world, but it used to be that in theaters when it was projected on film, the quality could kind of be iffy sometimes. You didn't always get a consistent product, and with digital you could control that. You can make it consistent. The movie that the director saw in the editing room could be shown to every audience consistently in the theater. It wouldn't. The film wasn't going to degrade. The image quality wasn't going to get worse. The sound wasn't going to get garbled, or it wasn't going to get damaged. It was a protection against all that, and that's what Lucas was really fighting for in the late 90s, early 2000s with the digital cinema. So Attack of the Clones, was kind of the first. Was definitely the first American film to be filmed entirely digitally.
Gotcha. I know George is really a pioneer of technology and stuff, so I was wondering if he was. I know he was definitely a player, and like we talked about with Jar Jar and stuff, with the motion cap stuff, but I didn't know if that included the digital quite here yet, but sounds like we're coming to that.
Yeah, they wanted this movie to be the first one, not just for the record, just for how much easier it would be for production, but they just didn't get the cameras ready in time. So
gotcha. Okay. Well, back to the scene a little bit. What do you? Well, you'll explain all this to me in a minute, but I've always found it interesting that that Qui-Gon says we can't use our powers to help her. I've always kind of wondered what that meant and what he's talking about there. What's the reference? Seems like he's referring to using mind tricks to convince the Gungans to help, but I don't know. Do you have insight onto what's going on there? And
yeah, I think that's probably a good example. I've thought of that. Yeah, because it's not super clear. I think it could mean. I think in general, it just means we can't start a war for her. Where it's like we can't run this war. We can't. It's like what Yoda in that deleted bit of dialogue where it's like, or maybe it was Mace Windu, where the Jedi basically told him, "Don't, if it comes to war, wait for the Senate's approval. Don't get involved. Just protect her." So it could be. I think it's attached to that a little bit, where they're not going to insert themselves in the situations. Yeah, use Jedi mind tricks like they did earlier with the Gungans, and kind of like what you're saying, they're not going to take charge and give commands and start telling the soldiers where to go and laying down the strategy. That they leave that to the Queen. She's in charge. They're just there to keep her safe. And so I think this line is kind of a part of that, where. And I think the most likely action they would take would be to use a mind trick on the Gungans, because it's right after he says the Gungans will not be easily swayed, and we cannot use our power to help her. So those lines are connected. So how would the Gungans be swayed? Well, we could use our powers, our mind powers. So I think you're probably right there, but I think the larger, I guess, just expand on that, because it's not. I think it's along the lines of what you're saying. It's just the larger idea there is that they're not trying to interfere with what's happening. Yeah, they're not warriors. They're not generals yet, right? That's what that comes in the next movie.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious. Yeah. Otherwise, I do appreciate the scene. I like it, and especially in light of what we've been talking about. How if it wasn't here, that would have been really weird to leave Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon on this bad note, I guess you could say. Yeah. So it is a worthy scene, I think, and it's good to see I don't know. It's kind of like when mom and dad are fighting, sort of thing, and then they're reconciled. You're like, oh, okay, everything's back to normal. Kind of feels like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah, man.
it's weird that it's their last. It's really the last conversation they have because there's so much movie left. It seems like, but really, there's so much. I think we're gonna start going through these scenes pretty quickly here because things are moving. We don't really have. There's not much dialogue. There's not a lot of long drawn out scenes. The scenes get quick. The action's quick, and so actually, maybe you don't realize it as an audience, but this is their last chance to talk, and even though it doesn't, and it kind of, if you've seen movies, you kind of get that feeling like, oh no, they're saying their goodbyes, that means one of them is going to die. But if you don't know what's happening, if you're, again, a kid watching it, or if you're not really thinking about it, it's just like you said, it's a nice scene between the two of them where, okay, they were fighting before, but now they're making up. And I like that Qui-Gon, he says, "You've been a good apprentice, Obi-Wan. You're a much wiser man than I am. I foresee you will become a great Jedi Knight." And so Qui-Gon, he doesn't speculate on the future much. That's not really his thing, but he does it here to tell Obi-Wan that he will become a great Jedi. Because he likes to, when he does talk about the future, he's looking at Anakin's future and he's looking at Obi-Wan's future. He sees greatness in both of them, and so he's very optimistic. He doesn't obviously he doesn't he's not doesn't if he does. I don't think he sees Darth Vader. I don't think he's seen that in Anakin yet, but because he wouldn't be, he probably, along with the rest of the Jedi, they see darkness, and I mean, Qui-Gon's kind of ignoring that, but here he doesn't. He's all about staying in the moment, stay focused in the present. But here he looks in the future a bit, and he says, "I foresee you'll become a great Jedi Knight." So I think it's just a fun little. I don't know. I don't know if it's meant to be that much of a statement of that idea. I don't know if it's that blatant, if Lucas really thought of it that way, but I think it just works out interesting. It works out in an interesting way that Obi-Wan's always, I should be mindful of the future, and Qui-Gon says, stay present, and then they kind of flip here. They kind of see each other's point of view where, Obi-Wan's kind of conceding to Qui-Gon's like, no, it's not my place. There's nothing really wrong with Anakin. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm sorry. And Qui-Gon goes, you're a good kid, and you're gonna be fine. Actually, you're gonna do great. You're gonna be a good Jedi. So they kind of meet each other in the middle here, which I think is it was a good way to orchestrate the scene.
It's a good character moment. I think you really get to see both of them, but especially with Obi-Wan here. I think it really is just a good moment on who he is, how you get kind of like prequel Obi-Wan in the beginning, and then here's a little glimpse of like Alec Guinness, old trilogy Obi-Wan, where he's humble, like, oh yeah, you're right, and I'm sorry about that. It's just kind of this softer side, whereas before he's, what are you doing, Master? Come on.
And it sets up the idea that he wants to carry on his master's legacy, right? And this scene allows it, the scene where Obi-Wan takes over his mantle. That makes sense now because we've seen how he looks up to Qui-Gon. We see that now, he believes in him. He does trust him, even though he may disagree with him sometimes. He does trust him, and he decides to, carry on his mission. So this scene really adds to that turn of Obi-Wan, where Obi-Wan really kind of changes it. His character arc kind of happens, like you said, from that kind of by the book, in the center, like George calls him the center line, the move that all the other characters deviate from, like Anakin and Qui-Gon are always kind of going off in these other directions. And Obi-Wan's like, nope, stay here. And Luke too. Luke even in original trilogy. But here Obi-Wan does soften. He does loosen up a bit. He goes, you know what? I'm gonna, as Yoda says, I sense Qui-Gon's defiance in you, which Obi-Wan doesn't have at the beginning of the movie, really. He's defiant to Qui-Gon, actually. So yeah, it sets up for that great ending, where Obi-Wan takes Anakin as his apprentice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. And I really feel like you had a good glimpse of who Obi-Wan is going to be. It's just a neat thing from episode 2 to episode 6. It's kind of neat. But yeah, what about you? Any other thoughts, or what's the master say here?
Actually, I was gonna bring up Lucas quote, because actually when you talked about the Alec Guinness thing, it made me think of this quote where Lucas talks about why he cast Liam Neeson, what were the qualities he was looking for in Qui-Gon Jinn. And especially since Obi-Wan, we talked about, he's trying to, as we just said, he's going to take on the mantle of Qui-Gon. He's going to try and become him. And so we see him start to do that here. You see him take on those Alec Guinness qualities. And so Lucas talks about that here, where he talks about casting Liam Neeson. He says, Liam Neeson is a master Jedi, the center of the movie, just like Alec Guinness was in the first movie. When you start to cast a character like this, you think, where are we going to find another Alec Guinness? Where are we going to find someone with that kind of nobility, that kind of strength, and that kind of center? Liam was the guy who could do it. There wasn't anybody else who could do it. And when we saw him in the part, it was like, of course, it's a natural. He had the presence we needed. He was tall and very strong with a powerful nature. And like Alec Guinness in the original movies, he was an actor that other members of the cast looked up to. So yeah, and so like it's a credit to Liam Neeson, but also kind of lets you know, like, this is kind of the character that Qui-Gon was. Lucas, when he casts people, it's interesting. People have talked about this, like Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, and have kind of joked that when they first auditioned for Star Wars, they didn't know who the director was, because Lucas was so quiet and he didn't really give them any. There wasn't much of an audition. He wasn't really directing them, and so they're kind of thrown off by that. But Lucas, basically, he's talked about his approach to casting, where he says, I know these people can act. I'm not trying to see if they can act, because I can see their credits. They've been in other movies, been in other TV shows. That's fine. That's good enough for me. I know they can act. What I'm looking for is their innate personality, like how they work with each other. What are they actually like as a person? And he kind of casts them by their personalities, not so much their acting ability to turn into a different personality. He wants to see what they have naturally. And so that's why I think, if you look at Mark Hamill, you look at Leia, and you look at Han Solo, the actors are very much those kind of characters. Han Solo and Harrison Ford are both kind of like the kind of sarcastic, kind of quiet, kind of gruff, and Carrie Fisher and Leia are very, very kind of feisty and very kind of opinionated. And Leia's not as funny as Carrie Fisher was, but then you have Mark Hamill and Luke, very, kind of optimistic and a lot of energy. And with Hayden Christensen, Lucas was looking for that darkness. He wanted a kid who had, a charm to him. He was endearing. You liked him, but there was an undercurrent of darkness there. And that wasn't something that he asked him to act. That is something he had in him, just naturally, just in his look, just in his demeanor. And so that's a very interesting way of casting, because it's very different from how most other filmmakers work. They look for actors who can totally transform themselves into a completely different character. And Lucas doesn't really look for that. He looks for someone who already has those qualities that kind of naturally have that. And then he knows that they can act, because they have other credits. They've been in other shows, been in other movies. And because again, he's not, especially with Star Wars, he's not looking for Oscar-winning performances. He's trying to do that movie serial thing. If you've seen those Flash Gordon movie serials, the acting is awful. There's nothing. There's no one's trying. No one's doing their best work there. But yeah, that's not why you watched those serials back in the day. You wanted to see the spaceships. You wanted to see the action. You didn't care about the acting. And the same thing with Star Wars. George actually goes above and beyond, even though he gets a lot of criticism for the performances and the wooden dialogue. He's actually doing way more than he needs to. Because if his goal is Flash Gordon, if his goal is Buck Rogers, if his goal is the movie serial from the 1930s, then he's doing way more than he needs to. And especially if you look at Clone Wars 2, I think people are more forgiving of Clone Wars dialogue and acting, because it fits in that space that we've kind of carved out for cartoons and kids shows, where it's like, that we can have more cheesy or more over the top acting, and because it's animation or it's cartoons, but it's really the same style. But when you see in live action, people all of a sudden go, oh no, this is bad. It's like, no, it's the same goal. It's still being delivered towards kids, still going for that space opera adventure where they're here for the action and the visuals. And George is using those brushes to primarily paint his picture with, but he does use dialogue and acting, just not as much. He's not as concerned with that. So I think the fact that he casts this way, I think, is very interesting. Kind of is telling that he's going for an effect, a general feel for these characters that will come across, even if the dialogue is quote unquote wooden, or even though he's not going to rely on the dialogue and rely on the acting as much as he is the camera work and the visuals and the cinematography and all that. So anyway, sorry,
That's cool.
went on like three different rabbit trails there. Anyway, tying it back to Liam Neeson and Qui-Gon. But
yeah, that's great. Boy, and he's fantastic. I mean, Qui-Gon's one of my favorite Jedi, and I really appreciate him in this movie. So, yeah, they did a good job.
Well, that's all I have for this scene. If you want to,
Okay.
if you're ready, we can move on to
Yes, sir.
the next one.
Into the swamp, sort of.
Yes. Yes. And actually, there's a deleted scene here. Do you know about this?
Possibly. Is it where he goes under?
Yes, there's a scene where Jar Jar. We actually see Jar Jar go to the Gungan city and look for everybody, and it's in the original script, so I might as well. It's not, again, it doesn't really count because it's not in the movie, but I think it's fun. I'll read it anyway.
Yeah.
So Jar Jar swims down into the bubble city. He enters the main square. He stands stunned in amazement and fear. He is nervous and shaking. I'm not going to do a Jar Jar impression. He says, "Hello, where does everybody?" The plaza is empty. He notices that many of the buildings are shot up as if there had been a battle of some kind. And so that's when, and then it cuts to him exiting the lake. So George has said that he just got rid of that because it was kind of redundant, because in the very next scene, he says, "There's nobody there." And there's some kind of a fight. So basically, again, we talked about how George doesn't want to repeat anything. Each scene, each shot has to give you new information. If it's telling you something you already know, it needs to go. It needs to be removed. That's definitely why he got rid of it. He said that's why he got rid of it. But I think it's still cool to think about, like, oh yeah, the droids went down underwater and attacked. Like, that'd been kind of cool to see,
Yeah, exactly.
An underwater battle droid fight.
Mm-hmm. That would have been really cool. I mean, we saw it in the Clone Wars, which was awesome. I can't imagine to see it live action. That would have been really cool. Yeah, I could see where it'd be redundant, though. Where, I mean, you're right. He comes up and tells them all exactly what they would have just shown. Yep.
Yeah, and of course, it wouldn't make sense over the course of the story to cut to this random battle on Naboo while we're still on Tatooine trying to deal with. It would have been too much. It would have been weird placement for that scene. But in a different story, it'd be cool to see a underwater fight between Gungans and droids. But then we get back to the scene where Jar Jar, that we see in the movie, where he explains to everybody there's nobody there, and they all try and figure out where everyone is. And what I think is kind of interesting is there's another scene here that's it's sort of actually just an extension of this scene, but they either filmed a different ending on the day, like they changed it before reshoots, or it was a reshoot. Actually, I think it must have been part of the original shoot, because Obi-Wan's not wearing his telltale wig, and so I think it was part of the. I think this must have been something they changed in the script before they got to the day of shooting. But it ends here with, Qui-Gon says, "Do you know where they are, Jar Jar?" And instead of Jar Jar making his speech, like, when in trouble, they go to sacred place. It says Jar Jar makes a strange chattering noise, and suddenly out of nowhere, Captain Tarpals and 6 other Gungan troops riding on Cadoos emerge from the brush. And Jar Jar says, "Hey, yo, Dally, Captain Tarpals." And Captain Tarpals says, "Binks, no again, not you again," basically. And Jar Jar says, "We come in to see the boss." Captain Tarpals rolls his eyes. He says, "Ouch time, Binks. Ouch time for all yous." And so that kind of sets up to the next scene when we see the Gungans and the Naboo meet. Captain Tarpals is leading them, and he introduces them to Boss Nass. So that's kind of what. So there's this initial scene where he met them first, or they met him first, and then he took them to Boss Nass.
Wow, that
so
was
just kind of
cool.
fun. Yeah, I was like, oh, it's a cool little moment. It might have just been cut for time, or maybe they didn't want to. Probably not for time, because this has been shooting, so they probably just didn't. I don't know. They cut it for some reason. I don't know why, but I think it's a cool little idea. It's like, oh yeah, it's so that you can imagine there's this little scene where maybe the dialogue happens the same way, where they encounter Captain Tarpals and he takes them.
Wow, that would have been really cool. And just hearing that really would have put the what do you want to say? Put the drama in the next scene. Just the threat. As it just walking up to him, it's kind of like, hey, here they are. We found them. But boy, in light of that scene, that would have just made this like, no, we're taking a big risk here. Like just the threat of Boss Nass and maybe surrounded by these Gungan army, just seeing the boldness of the Queen coming up here, Padme, and just saying, "We need your help." Like, wow, that would have really changed that scene. I wonder why he took it out. That would have been fun. I like it. I like what that scene was.
Again, it might be one of those things where it's sort of that sentiment of it being like there's danger there. It might be kind of redundant, because the next scene, Boss Nass is clearly not happy to see the Naboo, and he does kind of. And there's actually a line that was deleted from that scene where it's more clear why he's upset by them, and he threatens them. He basically says, "I'm thinking I'm going to kill y'all because you brought the mechaniques, you brought all the battle droids down on us."
Oh wow, okay,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh man, yeah. Oh, that would have changed it all. Even just hearing that, I'm like, oh man, okay, that's different than I. Yeah.
I think we've noticed this as we've gone through it, but a lot of the lines that have been cut have to do with killing and death and threats, whether from Palpatine coming from Sidious or not Palpatine, but it'd be weird if it was from Palpatine, but from Sidious, or in this case, Boss Nass, or I guess it was Captain Tarpals in the scene we just talked about. And so I'm wondering if that was just George worrying about his audience and worrying about, just talking about death and killing and murder a little too much for us as adult fans. Are like, that'd be so cool. that's so epic and intense. And would it raise the stakes? And if you were making this for adults, right, you would show all the Naboo people suffering in camps and being tortured or dying and starving, and you'd show the stakes more. And George kind of dances around it more. And I'm the closest thing I can, or the most reasonable explanation I can think of is because he has his audience in mind. And he thinks it'd probably be a little too intense for kids. Now, of course, by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, he knows it's necessary, really necessary, to show a lot of that horrible stuff, especially because it has to do with the main character. And it may just be that since this is kind of sort of a side issue at this point, like it doesn't have to do with Anakin or the Jedi. This is more, again, it's Padme's story, but it's also not quite directed at her. Like her life isn't exactly threatened directly, except for Darth Maul, I guess, that one time. So, and maybe I'm reading into this, but it seems like a lot of those lines we've been looking at that have been cut have to do with violence or in kind of with murderous intent a lot of times. So I'm just wondering if that's for a reason.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. So, I mean, George does a really good job at trying to focus on those 12-year-old boys, his primary target audience. Not that it's strictly for them, but yeah. Wow. But yeah, that was just have changed everything. I think. Yeah.
And here's the line I think I was talking about. Yeah. So when they show up, Boss Nass sees him. He says, "Jar Jar, you'sa payin' this time." But then the line in the movie happens, "Who's da usin others?" And then Amidala introduces herself and he says, "Naboo biggin. Yousa bringin' de mechaniques, they bustin' usin, or they bustin' us, like they attacked us." And he says, "You saw all bombad, you saw all dying, Misa Tink." So that's where he kind of threatens him.
Okay. You're gonna have to do some translating for me. This is now that we're going back through these lyrics. I'm like, oh man, I've never really thought about what this means. Like, what is he saying in these? Okay, so let's back up a little bit. Jar Jar, when he approaches Boss Nass, he says, I'm reading the subtitles. It's like, "Hey there," it's like Daddy-sa or something like that. I don't know. Is that a title for him?
Yeah. So in the script, he says it to Captain Tarpals at the beginning of the movie as well. He says, "Hey yo, Deli, Captain Tarpals, Misa back." And I think it's "Hello there."
Okay. And then Boss Nass says, "Who are these others?" Is that what he says there?
Yeah. Who's that usin others? It's like, Jar Jar Binks, who are these people? Who'd you bring with you? And that's why Amidala says, "I'm Queen Amidala of the Naboo." She answers his question. And he says, "Naboo Biggin." It's like, oh, the head Naboo, the head honcho. Yeah, you said bring the mechaniques.
Which is the machines, I think he's trying to say, right? And you saw all bomb bad. So is he just kind of calling them out, like saying, you guys, like, you're the reason this happened?
Yeah.
You guys are arrogant? Is that kind of what you think he's saying there? Or?
Well, I think he's just like, you guys, we don't like you. You're bad. You're evil. You're the ones who brought this evil upon us. So I blame you, basically. And I think it's interesting because he says "bomb bad general" later. He's like, yeah,
because Jar Jar almost says it like, "Whoa, you guys are awesome."
Yeah, like, you guys are. Yeah, that's right. He says, "You guys are bomb bad." I think it just means bad.
Yeah.
People kind of use it like, "Wow, that's bad. That's cool." Lucas has talked about where the language of the Gungans is trying to. It's kind of like Yoda, but a little more extreme than Yoda, where he's trying to just get across a general idea. We don't pick up exactly what they say, but just enough to get along and to understand what's happening.
Yeah, which is cool. It makes it really exotic, I think. Yeah, it really feels like a foreign people.
Yeah, exactly. It's that sense of talking to someone who you don't quite speak their language, they don't quite speak yours, but you're kind of meet in the middle somewhere. It's like sort of a broken pidgin English kind of thing.
Okay. Very good. Well, I may have to have you translate for me a few times as I go through this.
But I do have the script in front of me that makes it a little easier for me to read.
That's cool. Then we get the big reveal. right? This
Yep.
shocks the audience, everybody but Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. I always wondered. I always wondered until recently, like when you told me if Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan actually knew. Because the look I mean, it's never clear. We're just watching the movie. Like, it never is as blatantly obvious. Like, here, they knew. We know the whole time, you know. But, yeah, I like that little smirk. Qui-Gon gives Obi-Wan, like, kind of like, yep.
Yeah, it's like Qui-Gon's like maybe like slightly proud of her, but also like, oh, okay, like she's finally like everyone else is kind of figuring it out. He's kind of amused at everyone else freaking out. And I kind of like last time I watched, I was kind of looking at the back because you can see Rick O'Lee over Qui-Gon's shoulder. I'm like, did he know? How many of the Naboo people know? You know, and I think it's it's clear why it wasn't stated obviously whether Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan knew or not, because it was supposed to be a surprise for the audience, and so and so that's why he kept it quiet, but. In retrospect, yeah, you can go back and look at it and go, oh, I can see Qui-Gon teasing her. If the Jedi are as adept at sensing things in the Force as is demonstrated in this movie, then it's not a big surprise that they would know that the Queen is not who she appears to be all the time.
It's curious, like she throws you right in the middle of this conflict that we know nothing about between the Naboo and the Gungans. Like, I wonder what caused all the hostility. Were they just afraid of them, or is it a previous war, or what's going on? What caused the hostility? Not that we need to know. Like, it's not relevant to the story, I guess, but just curious.
Well, we get a few hints about their history here. Like when Padme speaks up, she says, although we do not always agree, Your Honor, our two great societies have always lived in peace. So there's never been a war.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah, there you go.
So we know that, but they clearly don't like each other. They've always been very separate. Live and let live. It makes me think it's sort of a Good Samaritan story. The Naboo might have stories where the Gungans are the kind of the villain or the unwanted in the story. And the Gungans probably, again, I'm just totally spitballing here, but just the idea that the Gungans would probably have a similar view of the Naboo, where it's like, what do you want to call it, racism or stereotyping, or just where they don't respect the other group. They don't think well of them. And we learned here that the Gungans think the Naboo think, the grammar here is getting interesting. The Gungans think that the Naboo think they're
better.
Yeah, that they're high above them. Like, oh, you Gungans are below us. You're less than the dust beneath our feet, kind of thing. And so therefore the Gungans don't like them either. But in terms of the history of the Gungans and the Naboo, it is interesting where, we don't really get to hear exactly, like you said, the history of it laid out specifically, but we do get little hints there. There hasn't been a war, but they've never liked each other. They've always been at odds.
Good call. Yep. I do find it interesting too. Just side note, but Padme reverts back to the Queen voice here. Like this is the first time we see Padme have that Queen sound, kind of the monotone, the more somber. Whereas like in her other interactions, she's more, I don't know, not quite as that regal monotone pitch.
Yeah. She's no longer playing the handmaiden role where she can be a little more loose and familiar. Now she's got to be more formal. Yeah.
You just kind of go, oh, there's the Queen. There she is right there. Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, I'm like, was she planning to do this? Like, when was she planning to reveal herself right here, or did she was it kind of a audible call at the last second, where, because we have Keira Knightley, who I can't remember her character's name. It's Arate or something. She's in the makeup. She's in the full regalia, and she starts off as the Queen, and then Padme steps forward. Now I know why Lucas chose to do it that way, because it was more. It's for dramatic effect. It's more shocking. Like, well, Padme, what are you doing? Why are you interrupting the Queen? What are you doing? And it's like, oh wait, you are the Queen. Okay, well, like I understand that's the effect, but I'm wondering what I'm thinking what his thinking was for the character's journey. Like, what did she decide? Did she decide to do this kind of trick? I'm kind of thinking about this for the first time right now, but just wondering why she chose that moment to do it. If it seemed kind of like spur of the moment idea, like I should do this, or maybe she planned it. I don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting because Keira Knightley's role, like, she looks surprised when Padme steps in front. It doesn't look planned, at least in her portrayal. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but she looks shocked, like, whoa, what are you doing? But I don't know. Interesting. But it is so cool to go back and think about what we've been saying the whole movie now. This is Padme's moment, Here she is. She's stepping up to it. She's taking the role. She's not hiding behind the mask or her handmaids anymore. This is her. She's embraced this role. She's the one doing the conversation. She's the one bowing the knee. She's the one making the decision. They're like, this is cool. This is it. She has learned her lesson finally. And here we go. I just think that's a cool moment. And like, maybe that's what you're going to say visually. Like she literally steps in front. of the queen or the fake, and there she is. But I don't know. I don't want to steal your thunder. It's like,
No. Well, I'm just thinking about. It's a good point, like you said, that she is surprised when the queen, the decoy is surprised when Padme steps out, and I realize like the timing of that is right after Boss Nass says, you saw all bomb bad, and then so Amidala, the decoy says, well, we want to form an alliance, and so that's where Padme's like, this isn't going well. I need to step in. I think is kind of what's going on there. Is that that's why she chooses that moment, because it's like, as the script said, it's not in the movie, but he's like, you saw all die in. Misa think he doesn't want to negotiate, form an alliance, and like because Amidala kind of just jumps right into, the queen jumps right into, we should form an alliance without really explaining why, or really giving him a reason why they should. And Padme's like, no, I don't know how to talk to Gungans. I've been dealing with Jar Jar now. He's told me why they don't like us, or why they think we don't like them. Yeah, she's got a way to talk to the Gungans now. She and Jar Jar are those two bridges between their two people, and with each other's help, they're able to make that connection. So I think now I'm thinking about it, I think that's probably why he chose that moment. But to talk about what you said, yeah, this is Padme's moment. This is that point where she lives up to her name, right? She is that lotus that shines out in the middle of the mud, right, in the swamp.
wow,
and
there you go, literally right here. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. This is the kind of literal version of that. But visually, the way the scene is set up, I really like what the production design is doing here. It's set in these ancient ruins of this ancient temple, right? They're in a sacred place, right? A temple, a ruined temple. So something good was lost. And on Naboo, it's the ruins of a lost civilization, and so these ruins of a lost civilization is the bedrock for the building of a new one. Like this is the foundation for where these two civilizations will come together and build a new one. And that's what happens in this season. I just like the visual of that, where it's taken something that, there was a civilization that collapsed, like Naboo is about to. This happened once a long time ago, and this civilization couldn't be saved, but we're going to come together and save it. And just to see that visual here is really cool. It's the first time we see these ancient sculptures, these ancient ruins from a civilization that's not from the Naboo, it's not from the Gungans. We're not really sure what it is. But it's just that the idea that their civilization is on the brink of ruin, and so they're not going to end up like this civilization did. This ancient temple, they're going to rise above and win. So,
wow, that's cool.
And like as you talked about, how she kind of steps out in front of the Naboo to confront the Gungans directly, but also I like that it starts out with Boss Nass and the Gungans elevated above the Naboo. Like he's standing up there trying to assert dominance, right? And he's looking down at them, and they're all on the ground. And of course, he's standing on one of those ancient heads. And then Padme, they're already lower than the Gungans, and he's trying to elevate himself up. He's like, well, they think we're lower than them, so I'm gonna stand up to him. But then Padme, instead of going up to meet his level and trying to be higher than him, she then kneels. She goes even lower, and so everyone follows her. And so now all the Naboo are kneeling down. And so just that visually, again, it's nothing, this isn't breaking news or anything. You can watch the movie and see if this is happening. But I just like to point out the obvious sometimes, because it's not always so obvious. Like this, George is telling the story visually here of what's happening, that the Gungans they think little of themselves. And so the Naboo is visually, we're showing that Padme is leading the Naboo to say, no, we're humbling ourselves. We don't think we're better than you. When we're actually at your mercy. We need your help right now. You actually are in a position where you're above us right now. You have an army, we don't. And so I just like that visually Lucas is always telling the story along with the dialogue. He doesn't just rely on the dialogue to carry it.
Wow, that's so cool. See, I never picked that up. Yeah, stating the obvious, and it went right over my head. So
me too. I didn't notice this till today actually. I looked at this and I just wrote this down today. I'm like, oh, I never caught this until just now.
Oh man, that was so cool. And it just here it is. I mean, the culmination of the lesson we've been seeing throughout the whole movie that we talk about all the time so far in this film, just the humility. Don't underestimate those that you used to, that you used to downplay. And yeah, power of humility, right? So cool. Yeah, boy, I never even thought about the visual aspect of that, where Boss Nass is higher and bigger, and yeah. Wow. Huh. That's cool. I like, this is total side note, but I really like how Jar Jar doesn't know what to do. He's like, should I kneel or should I not? And he just kind of goes down.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not a Naboo, but I'm also not really Gungan. I've kind of been banished. So what do I do? Yeah,
yeah. True. Yeah. I really appreciate those little moments like that, where he's just Jar Jar. It's great. So totally random, but I just watched it and it's great.
No, it's cool. A moment. Yeah. And it's, and it's a nice little, in a very kind of serious moment. Again, Jar Jar is always there to kind of lighten it up a bit.
Yeah, I like the dramatic tension we got here too. You know, it's just a long pause, and Boss Nass is just mulling this all over, and even that little whimper Jar Jar gives there, you know, he's kind of like, you know, I don't know what's going to happen right now. Yeah, I just really played out well. It's like we've talked about, George doesn't really do things, like he doesn't usually give slow moments like this, you know? So I would assume that when something like this happens, this is supposed to be really dramatic. You know, there's an intentional slow pause, you know? I just think that's really cool. Like we're supposed to feel the weight of this, I think.
Yeah, this isn't faster and more intense. You know, this is slow and well, it's slow and intense. But yeah, Star Wars does move at quite a clip, and when it doesn't, yeah, it's important to. It's that contrast lets us know this is a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. Yeah, I guess that's true. It's not really slow, is it? Because he cuts to a lot of faces here. You get everyone's expressions, you know. But it's just this long pause. I just feel the dramatic of it. And I've also wondered, this is a question for you, if you know of anything George intended to do there. But he focuses on the Jedi a few times, and Obi-Wan kind of gives this like knowing look, like he almost sees what's coming, and Qui-Gon does too. Do you know what's the point of that look?
I always read that as sort of what would you call it? A callback or a yeah, I'll just say callback for now. But when Obi-Wan says to Boss Nass, like, you and the Naboo form a symbiont circle. It happens to one of you will affect the other. You must understand this. And so, and that point, Boss Nass is just like, nah, you know, forget it. But here, Obi-Wan's kind of going like, hey, you figured it out. You learned the lesson. That's kind of cool. How I always read it.
Huh. Well, that's way cooler than I was thinking.
Well, because before it was the Jedi coming to the Gungans without the Naboo. They were representing the Naboo, but the Naboo weren't there, and the Gungans weren't really there. They weren't really having it. And then the Jedi go to the Naboo, but this is the first time where the Jedi are there to witness the two coming together. And now and when they actually face each other, it actually works. Jar Jar and Amidala allow that connection to be made. And so Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are there to go, okay, we've seen this kind of come full circle now. We were there when both sides didn't like each other, and now we've seen it. And so I think it's just their faces are just there to kind of comment on it. So that smile we get from Qui-Gon at the end, that smile we get from Obi-Wan is kind of just there to look at. They're happy with scenes to see things come full circle.
Wow, that's so cool. That cheese, man. That's awesome. I love it. And just to think about another big theme, or another one of the big themes that we've been talking about and learning about in episode 1, let alone all of Star Wars, is the symbiotic relationship. And yeah, here, like in Star Wars, George intentionally did this. When things are going well, it's when the symbiotic relationship is well. But when it tears apart is when the galaxy tears apart, you know? And so here, wow, that's so cool to think that full circle. And the Jedi, who would know this. Yeah, I never thought about that. That's why they look at him like this, like, here we go.
Yeah, they see a change in this guy. Like last time, this guy was like, no, get out of my city. They had to use a mind trick on him, right? And that's why Qui-Gon was like, we can't use our powers. And so even without the Jedi's mind powers, Boss Nass was able to come to an agreement with them. Like the Jedi weren't even needed. The Jedi didn't have to use any of their powers. And Boss Nass there's a visible change in him where he's willing to work with the Naboo now. And so, yeah, so they give a little smile.
That's so cool. That's way deeper than I was thinking. I don't even know what I was thinking, but that was not the case. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a cool thing because it's pivotal for Padme's character. It's the plot hinges on it too. Like everything's been building up to this moment where, yes, the symbiont circle needs to be it needs to be a circle. It needs to be intact. And so these two civilizations, these two groups need to work together. And we've decided we're going to do it now.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, everybody's learning their lessons. We're seeing the payoff from everything we've gone through. That's really neat. Wow, that's so cool. I've never even thought about that. Gee whiz. That's so great. This is why we do this, man. Changes it every time.
I know, right? There's so many things.
Wow. The last 10 minutes of this, or not even 10 minutes, but the last few minutes of this movie, just like, wow, everyone's coming to fruition. We're seeing all these lessons learned with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and now Padme and Boss Nass, and so cool.
And I love that the very next scene after this, if you were ready to move on to the next one, is we see the bad guys in Naboo, but for the first time, it's in daylight. We just had our allies. They came together. We had that thing we've been searching for. That goal was finally reached. Okay, we're gonna form that alliance. And so now the bad guys are in trouble because the darkness isn't reigning anymore. Now the light is returned. I just like that immediately the next scene is the bad guys, but it's in daylight. And right off the bat, Sidious is uneasy. Like, this is an unexpected move for her. It's too aggressive, you know. He's thrown off guard. And so I just like that. Yeah, again, visually the bad guys are not in their element. And so it's telling the story that the dialogue is telling us as well. It's a short little scene, but it works.
That's so cool. Yeah. Along those lines, is there an intentional thought? Is that the thought behind that line? He tells Maul, let them make the first move. Because that seems very un-Sith like. That seems like a very Jedi thing, right? Let's wait and see what happens and we'll react. Sith seem to be the ones that are like, no, take control and do it. Is that partially why you think that's the case, or is it just I'm just reading too much into this line?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. To me, it seems consistent with Sidious, right? Because he likes to let things play out and sit back and for example, his
That's a good call.
test of Anakin's skill in Revenge of the Sith. That's the first thing that I thought of was, he has Dooku fight Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, and whoever wins, he's not rooting for Anakin or rooting for Dooku. He's just rooting for whoever's the best, because he just wants the best apprentice. He wants the best Sith, always the best tool he can have. And so I think Dave Filoni actually talked about this with the Rebel Force Radio guys, that you talked about where Sidious isn't protecting Anakin throughout the Clone Wars. He's not, if he fails him, then he wasn't worthy of being his apprentice. Same with Darth Maul. Sidious totally ditches Darth Maul. And when Darth Maul shows up again, Sidious goes and tries to, kill him and take him out of the equation as quickly as possible as soon as he finds out that Maul is survived. Because he's like, nope, you're no longer part of the plan. You didn't prove yourself. So I feel like here,
good point.
Sidious is, I don't think it's entirely out of character for him to, he's not stupid. He's not going to step in without thinking and say, go in there and attack him. He knows that he's like, well, it looks like he said this is an unexpected move. So he looks like they're doing something different here. So let's sit back and see what they're going to do. And I can adjust my plan to that, because he's very good at adjusting he did that earlier in this movie when Amidala made it off Naboo alive. And so he's like, well, okay, I'll adjust my plan. I'll let her plead the case to the Senate, and she'll be the one who actually gets the Senate on Naboo's side, so I can be elected chancellor, And so I think it's another thing here where he's just kind of calling an audible and say, let's just wait, let's see what happens. So I wouldn't say it's out of character for the Sith to do that.
Okay.
But that's also me. You say you're just thinking about it right now. That's me just thinking about it right now. I'm not sure. I haven't done a lot of research. I haven't verified that with anything Lucas has said. I just, from what I can tell so far, from what I've seen for the movies and from what little research I've done, it seems like that makes sense. I don't think that is completely out of character.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, he is the master chess player. That's a good point. Yeah, that is a really good point. Yeah, I was curious because he does seem so taken off guard here. Like, whoa, what are we gonna do?
I think it does make sense that he says to Darth Maul, like, be patient, like hold off, let them make the first move, because Darth Maul does kind of seem to be the more aggressive one, where he's like, he seems to be more the one to jump in and just start swinging the blade, where Sidious kind of says, hang back a bit and see what their plan is. But he's more the schemer and the planner. And again, Maul is just a weapon.
That makes sense, because it does seem really in character for Sidious. But I feel like Sidious he's the ultimate Sith, but he feels different than the traditional Sith we know, who are so headlong, rush in.
Well, I think that's why he's lasted so long, right? That's why
exactly.
He's able to play he plays the long game. That's why it makes him such an effective Sith. He's insidious. It's the evil it's the evil that slowly creeps up on you that you don't see coming. Whereas Maul is, that name suggests you're just getting torn to shreds, and there's nothing's being hidden there. So it's so I think you're right. It's a good indication of his character that he plays the long game, and so he's the Sith that survives the longest.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. But it's cool. I mean, and again, just the visual picture of like Darth Maul. I mean, it's so cool. He looks awesome.
I know. He can be the shortest guy in the room and still be intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, he just draws your eye right to him. It's just so cool. Just this. Yeah, I mean, Maul, right? I just think of this like raging beast, just ready to claw and go at it, and he just looks the part. It's so cool. I just have to say that every time he pops up on screen, because it's just like, oh man, there's Maul. He's so cool. Yep. Yeah,
it's cool, and it's good that you have the movie in front. It's funny, you have the movie in front of you, and I have the script in front of me. So like, it's so good. You always pick up on these visual things and point them out, because I forget, because I can't see the movie right in front of me. So when he pops up, I forget to be like, oh yeah, there he is. So it's good. So it's good. Yeah, I'm glad you keep bringing those things up, because I forget about those when each shot appears and in what order. Because otherwise, it's I don't want to skip that, because that is important. Like, his makeup, his I think the brief that Lucas gave his artist was like, draw the most terrifying thing you can think of, the most like draw something out of your nightmares. And I think I want to say, was it Ian McCaig? I think who did this design. I don't know. He's like the rock star of all the designs in the prequels. But anyway, I want to say Ian McCaig for now designed the makeup, the red and the black and the yellow eyes, and it works so well. You know what though? You know the thing about the horns, the little fact about what his horns were originally?
No, I don't think so anyway.
So in the original drawing, they're feathers.
Oh.
And so they're tied, and there's these tiny little strings kind of like tying them, or like there's these basically just very, very thin headbands, like just a thin wire with little feathers attached to it. But when that painting or piece of art was given to the makeup department to fabricate it, and they misinterpreted it. They looked at it and they didn't really see the line. It was such a thin line. They didn't really see the fact there was a headband that didn't look like feathers to them. It looked like horns. And so they interpreted it as horns, and they're like, oh, that's way better actually. Let's keep that. So
nope, never do that. That's cool. I was trying to see if
so Darth Maul almost had feathers.
Wow, that would have been so different.
Yeah, right.
Wow, is this the picture here?
Yeah. Yep, that's it.
Gotcha. Huh. It does look like horns. I'm not sure I ever would. Oh yeah, you can see the string there. Okay. And you can see how it's wow, okay. Yeah, never picked up on that. That's cool. Darth Maul is just awesome. And his eyes, the Sith eyes are so cool, you know. Even in Revenge of the Sith, where you see Anakin with the Sith eyes, it's just powerful. Yeah.
And I found this out this week just about that, actually, was that was Hayden Christensen's idea, was to add the Sith eyes.
Really?
So yeah, and he originally wanted it in the scene where Anakin basically dooms Mace Windu to his death when he turns. But originally Lucas was like, nah. He had this argument with Lucas where he's like, well, we should do the Sith eyes like Darth Maul and like Sidious. And Lucas is like, well, but Count Dooku doesn't have Sith eyes, you know, because I think his reasoning was, well, Sidious has these evil yellow eyes, and Darth Maul, that's like his alien eyes. And so he didn't really think of them as Sith eyes. But then he thought about it and he came back to Hayden Christensen. He's like, you know what? That's actually a good idea, but not for this scene. We'll put the Sith eyes in the scene where he, kills the Separatist leaders. So, yeah, Sith eyes are still kind of a mystery to me. I'm like, what's going on? What's up with that? Like, it was cool just to learn that. It's like, oh, so Lucas originally wasn't his intention to put that there, but Hayden Christensen got him thinking about it. He's like, no, actually, that's a good idea. We'll put that there.
That's cool. Wow, there you go. Yeah, because that's a change. Because I know in the Clone Wars they do add that for Dooku in a couple scenes.
See, I don't know if they do. Yeah, that's
they
the
do.
One. See, I keep looking. I'm like, is it? Every time I guess the one I've seen didn't quite convince me. Like it didn't quite look yellow to me. It looked like a little.
Yeah.
it was just off just enough. I'm like, I don't know if that's. Yeah. I'll have to look at it again.
It's really not obvious. Like you could never point it out in the Clone Wars. It's only from the commentary. That's the only way you can tell. Because they did a big they did a big featurette on it. Like here's the first time we see Dooku's Sith eyes, you know. But yeah, you're watching it and it's like I didn't see it. So
that's cool. I didn't know that. I want to find those. Apparently there were commentaries for Clone War. I think it was at least season 1, maybe season 2, where they did commentaries for each episode as in addition to like featurettes and stuff. And I can't find those anywhere. So I think the DVD, I had the DVDs back in the day. And I think all I remember were like the little featurettes, but I don't remember the commentaries. So I want to find those somewhere. I don't know where they are.
We'll have to find them. I have the DVDs and Blu-ray, so I'll have to pull it out.
Yeah, because once we get to Clone Wars, I'm going to need those. You can't. I have to have those.
Oh yeah, man.
There's going to be so many goodies in there. Anyway.
But, sorry, tangent. But anyway,
no, you're good. Well,
Darth
it's
Maul's
still
great.
Star Wars, so not quite a tangent.
That's right.
Yeah, Darth Maul is great. Yeah, exactly. Full stop. Darth Maul is awesome.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right, that's it for this episode. Join us in the next one as we continue our series on the Phantom Menace. As always, thanks for listening, and on to the next one.